After studying psychology and alternative spirituality for most of her life, an unlikely turn of events steered Dara McKinley towards a path of forgiveness. Examined through the lens of her previous knowledge, she discovered that forgiveness is an effective healing modality and that its essence is much bigger than one's ability to pardon. Feeling called to help many people deterred by mainstream forgiveness definitions, today Dara guides people beyond popular forgiveness understandings and into a practical spiritual process that restores peace. Dara, welcome to the Deep Life Podcast.
Yay, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here.
We are just thrilled, and I want to jump right into, because I'm at the edge of my seat, as opposed to probably our audience too. What was this turn of events? How did you get to this forgiveness path and a new kind of understanding? But yeah, what was the catalyst, if you don't mind sharing?
So I had an idea for a business, and in my naive enthusiasm, I paired up with business partners that I would eventually see that I was incompatible with. However, the business took off, and it was a very joyful business. And so we endured each other for as long as we could. And then in 2009, everything fell apart and I was pushed out and I lost my share of the business, which was 50% a total relief because these relationships were stressful. And so I was like, there was definitely, my initial response was like, oh, this is over, thank God, And then my next response was like, oh, wow, this is a big hit. Like, because I got so much joy out of this business. It was my idea. Like, I had invested so much in creating it. And I thought, okay, Dara, you've been studying psychology and spirituality your entire life. You have a lot of blessings in your life. You're going to harness all these tools and move forward. And so you're going to focus on the good, you're going to lean into your relationships, you're going to process your emotions, you're going to recreate your life. This was kind of, what I was thinking at the time. And I did all of that. And 3 years later, I noticed myself still playing a negative narrative in my head. That was, when I'd be washing the dishes or doing the laundry, I just noticed like a rumination happening. And that's...
Have you seen my journal? Because I do that too. I totally get it.
And so that's when I was like, that actually didn't prompt me onto the path of forgiveness. I just noticed that it was there. I knew I wasn't over it. That was what that narrative was telling me. And then I started slowly sliding into a mystery illness that had the symptoms of anxiety, fatigue, insomnia. And I had a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old. And I'm a self-confessed hypochondriac, and the doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. And so I started freaking out. And I identify as being a very spiritual person. I remember myself being a very spiritual little girl. So, I have the ability that, when I reach these kind of crisis moments, to kind of implore the universe and get a message back. So I went into one of these crisis moments of like, I need guidance. Like, I need you to show me the way out of this. I am freaking out. And the message I got back was forgive. And I immediately knew I had something to forgive. Like that was my initial hit. And this is something I really want to emphasize. I did not like that message. And I know that I'm speaking for a lot of people out there. I did not want forgiveness to be the answer to my problems. I did not want to let these people off the hook. There was something about the fact that it had the word give in it, and I had lost something that was so dear to me that kind of, triggered me. So I got the message. I knew it was relevant. And then I immediately kind of rolled my eyes as like a teenager, like, oh, for God's sake, you know what I mean? Like, and my prayer was like, anything you tell me to do, I will do, and then I get this message and I'm like, oh, but accept that. But it was so clear and it was so strong that about an hour later, I said, okay, Dara, you like to try new things. You can, if you have directions, you can give anything a go. Like, give it a go, get online, find whoever wrote the 5-step how to forgive thing, and follow it for the next month and see what happens, be a researcher about it. And I got online and I typed in how to forgive. And what came up, 99.9% of it was about why a person should forgive. And the teeny bit I could find, which would be on some forum somewhere where someone like me was saying, but how do you do it? Was being met with, you just do it. And so I was like, wow, like I can't just do this. Like I really do need directions, and I'm on my own here. Like I need to figure this out. And so I was like, okay, if anyone, you've been studying psychology and spirituality your entire life, like grab those tools and figure this out. And so the question I asked myself that stepped me onto the path was, I was like, all right, I have been looping this negative and kind of resentful narrative in my head for 3 years. It's getting me nowhere. It's potentially making me sick. What's the opposite of that? And my answer to that question was, oh, I would bless this situation with the highest love. And with that answer, I took my first step and entered into the land of forgiveness. And what I entered into was a 3-week process, which is what I teach people today. I don't think forgiveness is just a decision, or you just let it go. You just stop being angry. You just cease anger. Or no, wait, you just have compassion. There's all these justs out there that like put a lot of pressure on people to all of a sudden become these like holy spiritual beings when they're in a crisis. And so I teach people how to kind of do a spiritual process over a 3-week period. So I went and did this, and 3 weeks later I was at peace. And I had 2 thoughts. I was like, wow, forgiveness is for real. Like because I was a geek for healing modalities. So I was like, whoa, like this is for real. And then my second thought was, and that isn't pardoning. Why in the world does everyone say that it's pardoning? And then that kind of initiated a whole other journey for me. And here I am.
I love it. Thank you for that background. That makes complete sense. And gosh, it is never fun to go through circumstances that you put your heart and soul into something as a business as you did, and then to have it almost taken away and ripped away. I can only imagine what that's like. And I I've found within our also spiritual journey that we've been on for over a decade, I don't know where it came from or how I perceived it, but you feel like you're spiritual and nothing can touch you. Like, oh yeah, I'll forgive easily. Or like, I'll let that go. And as you so gracefully described, like 3 years later, here you are ruminating, and it's like something's not making sense. So I loved your description on like really tapping into that essence deep down within you to figure out what it was. You mentioned something really briefly, and I'd like to dive into this next. You said you grew up spiritually, or you perhaps like knew this from a very young age. Like, were your parents like this, or caregivers, however it was? Like, did you always have this spiritual background?
No, I was just born spiritual. My father was atheist and my mother was agnostic, and she grew up in the Catholic tradition, and she questioned it and was reprimanded for questioning it. So she intentionally brought my sister and I up to figure out our own spiritual paths, which was this really beautiful thing in the 70s to like, and I had this Catholic, all these aunts and uncles orbiting us, kind of saying, no, you put her in Sunday school, you have her confirmed, and really pressuring her. And she was like, absolutely not. She raised us to be seekers. And so, and I just was born with a felt sense of unconditional love. That's how I describe it. And I'm not an unconditionally loving person. I just have this sense of unconditional love, which is kind of what propelled me onto the path of psychology, and merging psychology and spirituality. So when I asked myself that question that night and said, oh, I would bless this with the highest love, for me, it was an easy reach because I have been feeling it my whole life. So I was like, oh, okay, I know where the highest love is and I can do this. I know that not everybody has this experience that I have. A lot of people do, but a lot of people don't. So one of the things I help people, step one in what I teach people is like, what is your experience of unconditional love? How is it showing up in your life? And so is it showing up with your family, in nature, in your creativity, there's a lot of different ways that it's flowing into our lives. And, so anyway, I'm going down another rabbit hole, but that's your answer. There's the answer.
That unconditional love question is really interesting, actually, and something that I let's just go down that rabbit hole like a little bit more.
Sure.
I feel like most people don't get that. I feel like I'm just understanding what unconditional love is for myself. because my family, and again, this is absolutely nothing to knock religions, especially the Catholic religion. Dan and I talk about this. Him and I were both raised with our Catholic families, but I tend to still recognize a lot of Catholic guilt that I have, and being brought up that way. It was, I don't want to use the word forced, but it was very,
there's an indoctrination.
Yes, it was like, this is the path that you're going on. And for me, unconditional love, the way that I experienced it, was acting and being a certain way, adhering to those kind of rules and regulations. And if I steered in any other direction, it was like, no, that is unacceptable. Go to your room. So I'm trying to understand the language of like, how can I show up in this world as the true authentic self that I am, and allow people to see me in that light without them judging. And it's really a judgment that I have on myself, that's what I'm trying to relinquish in a certain way.
So you were both raised within the Catholic Church?
Yes.
So you heard about forgiveness your whole lives, right?
Yes.
Yes.
And and it was defined as pardoning.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. So I understand unconditional love as a spiritual love. That's
yes.
that. So it's not human love, but it does flow through us and flows for us. Are either of you like really strong meditators?
Both of us,
Yes.
every single day, sometimes 3 times a day. We've
Well,
been on the spiritual path for like over a decade,
okay.
and probably a little bit longer. So yes.
So not everybody has had this experience, but I love to ask, devoted meditators this question, like, have you ever merged with like a profound love during meditation?
Yes.
Me, so not during meditation. I've said this on another podcast. Full disclosure, was on cannabis, and I was sitting across from like my mother and stepfather, and all of a sudden something washed over me, and I swear to God, I was looking through a lens of unconditional love, and they had no names, no gender, no nothing. Like I was just witnessing them in the purest essence. And it just, like, to this day, I haven't felt it again since then, but it's like, I long for that. Like, I know it almost an indescribable feeling.
Right. Yeah. What about you, Dan?
I have in meditation definitely had moments where everything melts away and I'm just in.
Right. So there it is, right?
Yes.
So that's the love I'm repping.
It's so different from the conditional love that we are raised in. I think especially forgiveness implies conditional love. I think the way that it was taught, not how you're talking about it, I think, and I'd love to get into your definition of forgiveness. I feel like forgiveness in the Catholic Church, where it's like, you can come here and tell us your sins and say a prayer, and you can,
and if you kind of measure up to what our standards are,
and then receive the love, and you have
it was like an immense amount of conditions.
Yes.
Yeah, and prerequisites to earning this like God's love that is supposedly unconditional, even though for whatever the reason there's 100 conditions right now. So I feel you, because even though my mom protected me from it, it was still all around me, and so so unconditional love really is unconditional. And so the best metaphor to help people understand it is that I say it's like sunshine. Like the sun has zero ability to withhold itself from whatever it's in its path. And that's the same thing as unconditional love. It has zero ability to withhold its love from whatever is in its path. And it is something that once we kind of see how it's flowing through in our lives and flowing through us, then it's medicinal. It's kind of like, it's a free medicine. And I say, for people who like to party, I'm like, it's a free drug. Like, and that it's something. And so this is kind of like going into my definition. It's something that we can access and apply. And that's how I define forgiveness. It's the ability to have a practical application of this love, access it and apply it. And the second part of the definition is the ability to identify exactly what about the forgiveness equation that you're working with needs the medicine.
Interesting. That makes so much sense to me.
Right. And as far as the earth realm is conditional, this is a conditional existence, but the spiritual realm is an unconditional place that devoted meditators, even though I have this felt sense of unconditional love, I'm not an unconditionally loving person. I just, for whatever reason, was born with this feeling of it. But like you, Dan, like only once in meditation did it completely take me over. And it's actually, for the first time it happens, it's unsettling.
Yeah, it's jarring. Yeah.
Yeah. You're like, whoa, because it's like you get thrown into an ocean.
Yeah.
And you're like, wait a minute. And then your mind kicks in and then it goes away, So it's like you really have to like train yourself to be with it, But anyway, so yes, so that's what I teach people to do. And when people master that process, pardoning, ceasing anger, letting go, having compassion, I call those all, which are now the mainstream narratives of forgiveness, those 4 things, those all become like the potential outcomes, those all become they just all naturally fall into place. You don't even have to compel them. Like you automatically have compassion, you see the bigger picture, you see, you have no interest in being angry anymore. So ceasing anger is no big deal. You want to move forward with your life and create. So you just let it go. Like all of that stuff, instead of being like, oh, I need to let go and kind of like forcing yourself to do something when you truly have a lot of strong emotions about something really intense that has happened. I don't get that. I know I'm not alone. You know what I mean? Like I see. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, oh no, go ahead. No, go
ahead. You mentioned before, like as you were beginning this journey into forgiveness, that there was pushback and that you didn't want to, because you didn't want to necessarily like let these people off the hook.
Right.
How would you now, like looking back now on what you've learned and understood about and how you've experienced forgiveness, like what is the difference? Or like, do you still feel like you're letting those people off the hook for something, or do you feel like it's a completely different experience?
Yeah, it has like letting them off the hook, not let it, it's like, it's kind of irrelevant. It's really about me restoring my own inner peace and in being a vessel for unconditional love, and being a vessel for love, and or be if we like if you're not like deeply invested in your own state of inner peace and your emotional self-care, because emotions are the things that disturb our peace the most, right? And we currently live in a culture that does a lot to disregard our emotional states. And so people get emotionally congested, and that accrues over time and then eventually takes its toll in one way or another, And so to me, it's like it's incredibly spiritual and generous of me to make sure that I'm as empty as I can be, for the love to work through me. And out into the world. And so that's the other piece, it really is about returning yourself to a clear and centered place where you can integrate this thing that's happened, that I now see that, I'm in the land of ruptures and betrayals, right? So people come all the time with some really intense thing that has happened. And at this stage of the game, even though it takes time for a person to see us, it's all spiritual Tinder. It's all spiritual kindling, or I don't know, forget the word Tinder. I didn't mean to. It's all spiritual kindling,
Play with words because it fits like beautifully.
Okay, I'm sorry. I have some. Okay, it stopped. I had some button jumping up and down.
No, that's okay. Amazing. Well, I'm curious too, because as you were describing that story, well, I have this is kind of like a 2-part question, so I'll allow you to answer which one you want first. it brought me giggles when you said like you were ruminating during, dishes and laundry. I tend to do the same thing where I believe I've let something go or released an emotion that like my ego attached to it, but then I also recall like the narration and the stories that this part of me keeps talking about and ruminating. And it took me a long time to understand, or at least become familiar with my own voice, that this is me. This is me here, almost creating this suffering through the story that I'm telling myself and allowing to perpetuate and fill my mind. But I also recognize that that's what the ego, the part of me, wanted, because it's keeping me in that loop and it's keeping me safe and protected, just as it did perhaps when the circumstance actually happened. Like, this is it. This is now your identity, to hold on to this grudge, to be angry and to not technically forgive. Or that spiritual ego comes in a little bit and says, well, forgive them a little bit. You'll be okay for, a little while. But then the rumination continues. So I wanted to get an understanding of how that relates to you and like how you interpret our mind conversations, those thought energies that bring about like those feelings that come with agitation and rumination, and like how that alleviated for you.
So I'm very emotion positive. I actually think that emotions are very misunderstood, even the words like management and regulation, like emotions are kind of having their day, but they still come along with these words of like, they need to be regulated, they need to be managed, and I actually think that's like still missing the mark about why they exist and what they're for. Mm-hmm. So my first thought when there's a strong rumination is that there's a part of our emotional realm that needs to be seen. So if you kind of think of the 4 realms of experience, like the realm of action needs freedom, right? You need freedom in order to do whatever you want, whenever you want to do it. The realm of thought needs information, right? And the realm of the practical realm needs resources, right? And so the realm of emotions needs to be seen. And this is one of the things that I teach in the course, because a lot of people don't really understand this about the emotional realm. And that once they realize like, oh, like I have the ability to see my own emotions. And when they are seen, they start to circulate through and do the really wonderful things that they're here to do. Then they also kind of move out of the way, and unconditional love has a greater potential to saturate the person. So, and then with that said, so I take people through this process that has a strong emphasis on getting the emotional realm to circulate and seeing the emotional realm. And again, it's not like indulging the story. It's not, it really is just like a very mundane, like, hey, we have an emotional system. It's anatomical, even though you can't see it. And that throws a lot of people off and has a lot of people creating like weird narratives around it. But it's like, if you can kind of get beneath the narrative, you'll see this emotional system there that needs some attention, and then it'll start to move. And then as it moves, you will progress. However, once you like graduate that, people often feel this tremendous sense of relief and of having let go. A person, kind of looping back to what you're saying, a person then is at a crossroads, because you can always choose to go back to the rumination from that point, right? Like at that point, you have to say, once you have like fully seen and gone through the process, and for most people, it's not as tempting at all. Like people truly are in my course because they want to move past it and be done. I've never gone back to the rumination. And when I go through my forgiveness process, which I'm a junkie now at this point, I'm constantly, I love it. I'm done, you know what I mean? Goodbye. But I do know that like for some people, you get to a point where you do have to choose like, oh, I'm not going to go back to that narrative again. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that absolutely makes sense. I think that one of the biggest things I've learned, and like kind of what I'm listening and resonating with you saying, it's really cultivating that inner awareness to now be discerning. it's really like, all right, this story is possibly coming back up. Do I need to give myself a hug? Do I need to journal for a second? Do I need to sit with the emotions to allow whatever is coming up to just come and go through me? And then it usually dissipates for myself. But like, I love what you're saying. It's just allowing that emotion to be seen and worked through. It's energy emotion. That's truly what it is. I think that's
yeah, I'm currently going through a huge transition right now, and I sometimes will be woken up in the middle of the night with like a very strong, like, oh, you know, and 30 years ago, I would have spun out, you know, into, oh my God, you know, like what's happening? I had a nightmare, whatever. And now I wake up and I'm like, oh, you need to be seen. I literally reach for the journal. I open it up. I get to work, you know, I see it, and then I close the journal and I turn off the light and I go back to sleep. So at this stage of the game for me, like I can identify emotional congestion very quickly. And I can also see how it manifests, you know, symptom wise when I don't pay attention.
Let's talk about that. Yes, because I'm really curious how you said too at the beginning that you were starting to get sick. And I'm sure after coaching hundreds of people, how does this, you know, unforgiveness or, you know, holding on to grudges, what does that do physiology to our body?
I think it has, you know, an immense burden on the physical body, and is, you know, probably a lot of, you know, a very strong reason why people partake in substances, right? Is that they're feeling a lot of strong emotions, and they have no guideline in the mainstream culture for how to work with it. And so, you know, I am sober. I have partied enough for like 20 lifetimes, you know. At this stage of the game, I'm sober. And I'm a very highly sensitive person who experiences a lot of strong emotions. It's almost like the universe gave me this job and, you know, kind of said, oh, honey, you know, in order to have this job, we're going to have to put you through it because we really want you to speak from, you know, firsthand experience, you know. So I do really believe that I get handed some really huge things to somehow navigate. And I cannot, at this stage of the game, I cannot reach for a substance. And yeah, and I get to points where I'm like, whoa, I know why someone wants a substance. You know what I mean? Like, this is like the perfect moment where I could use a substance. And instead, you know, I get the message like, nope, figure it out. You can figure it out. And so, yeah, so I have kind of been forced to, you know, become a rock star about processing my emotions.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not easy. You know, I used to wonder when I was younger, like, why are people so emotionally averse? And then I'm 53 now, and I'm like, oh, I know why people. Because there really are some that can feel like they could break you. So even more the reason that I love the fact that I have unconditional love, because when I go into that inner realm and I'm potentially facing something that I fear might be too much for me, it's almost like unconditional love is like a shield and a sword.
I love that.
Like I could see why if you didn't have it, you would not want to take that journey, right? Like if you didn't have protection and so I get it.
Yeah, especially within a culture. I mean, I too wholeheartedly agree. Like emotions are having their moment. They're on the stage now. And I do believe it's because, you know, the generations before us just didn't know how to process it. I mean, like I said, I was always told myself I was either way too excited or too emotional. I cried too much, like do it somewhere else, like close the door. What did that happen? I like closeted my emotions for, you know, nearly 20 years and didn't cry. And then it's just cascaded throughout my body in so many different scenarios of anxiety and stress and low self-worth. And I mean, just a plethora of things. But yeah.
Right. And it's, so they're kind of swinging back to, you know, what you said. It's like a person can invite the body to speak, right? Like, so that's what I was getting at, was that I'm going through a huge transition. And just like 2 nights ago, I felt my esophagus, which is the vagus nerve, like, inflamed. And so, as I said, like, I'm a hypochondriac, so I can go down that road of like, oh my God, I need an endoscopy. And instead I whipped out the journal, and I kind of said, like, you can like go directly to different parts of the body and say, tell me whatever it is that you want to say. And it's really about letting it be as raw and young and primal and whatever. Like, it can make zero sense whatsoever, but it's just really allowing it to have its full expression.
Yeah.
And I did that for about a half hour. I bawled, as I said, I'm in a huge transition right now. And so I did it for about a half hour, and then I closed the journal and went to sleep. And the next day, my esophagus wasn't inflamed. So, so it's like this is like once you get into my course, this is this very big thing that I teach people. So I'm kind of like going, forward without the basis, but this is called the deep. So
Absolutely, no, I love it, and I think that that's great, and kind of what you touched upon. I know Dan has something to say, so I'll give him a second. But I love that you're explaining that you're giving yourself opportunities to feel, have the experience of emotions, and work through it. And I think that that's what so many people don't do, and then we get stuck.
Yeah, I was just like kind of along those same lines, and similar to the idea we were talking earlier about like ruminating on these things. I definitely, grew up emotional, but also told to not be so emotional. I repressed a lot of things for a long time, and I'm really just starting now to really dive into understanding my emotions better. And something I've noticed over the last year, I started to like finally figure it out, but something that's always happened is like when I'm exercising and moving my body in different ways, different stories and emotions will come up.
Right.
And it's like I finally realized, rather than either I'd be in the middle of my workout and then just like also having an argument with someone from 10 years ago about something that I was upset about, and like protecting myself and like really deep in that ego part of it. And then I just like do that until it ended. And then it would like come back up another time. I'd be doing the same exercise or something, and the same story would start coming up. And I realized, okay, I'm finally at a point where I can handle this now. And it's coming up so that I can actually feel it and look at it and see it, like you're saying. And I wonder if this is something that is coming up a lot with your clients, where it's like moving the body in different ways and doing things is allowing emotions to come out. And then we have the opportunity to forgive that and release it rather than keep suppressing it.
Right. I mean, you could almost say that unforgiveness is like an unseen emotion, right? Because we, then create that mental stance, that protective, when really it's just a part of us that really wants to be seen. That's like such a beautiful story you just told about how like those parts of you were coming up and saying, hey, Dan, see me now. And you finally were like, yes, I have the ability to do this now. So it's one of the big things. It's kind of the crux of, because when you learn how to apply unconditional love, it's actually, as I said, it feels really good, like that's how the course begins. And so people are like, oh, forgiveness is awesome, and then when I start to address like, okay, now let's move into the part that identifies the parts of you that need it, or what, it doesn't even have to be the parts of you. It can be aspects of whatever it is that you're forgiving that need unconditional love. And so that then becomes a somatic experience, where I have people start to, instead of like looking at this practice that they're doing of applying unconditional love, start to look at what the energies are in their body and seeing them. And so the 3 ways that I teach people to do it is through writing, through movement, and through art. And this is another piece, we're meant to move, right? Like we're primal animals. We're meant to move. And it's just so interesting how we're kind of trained to become these like soldiers, these stoic soldiers that, stand in line and don't go out of place. And there's just so much emotional health in movement. Oh my God. And it's like when you're kind of like clamping down, you know, on yourself or, you know, feeling afraid, it's like, no, actually, that's just like, just start moving and let it be weird. You know, with the writing, I tell people, let it be raw. And with the movement, I'm like, let it be weird, you know. And then the other thing I teach is creativity, you know, and with that, it's like people are like, oh, but I'm not an artist. It's like, no, 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 let it be simple. Let it be the recycling, you know, and like trash. Like there's so many ways. And all of this is to, you know, all three of these modalities are to see the emotional realm and to let the body say whatever it needs to say. You know, one of the strong examples of this is if you're ever trying to calm down a 2-year-old and you try to reason with them, or you try to contain them, or you try, you know, none of that works. It just inflames the whole thing. But as soon as you just start reflecting to them and say, oh, wow, it really was sad that the stick broke. They're like, and they look at you with the eyes of gratitude. Thank you, you know. And then you say, yeah, I understand. I see you. And then they move on to the next moment, you know. So it's that's actually, people think like 2-year-olds are the biggest pain in the ass, but they're actually the best teachers ever if you loop into what's actually happening.
That's amazing. I feel like I want the listeners to really get this, or at least this is how I'm hearing it. And it's beautifully touching me because like in resonance with our show, the depths of like understanding who we truly are at the deepest level, what you described there through like the journaling, the movement, the creativity, like that's tapping into our nature. Like writing, like, yes, I've rage written over the past like couple weeks, like my friggin' inner teen going bananas right now. And I'm just letting her, and it sounds psychotic, but I'm like, oh my gosh, thank you. Like, thank you for showing me. And like, sometimes my movement, like I will just put on like my 2000 dance mix and like have it and jam out. Like I will do it by myself, but it doesn't matter. It's like, okay, I'm getting to know me. I'm getting to know these parts of me that I've been suppressed for so long. And I've been really into photography lately. And it's something that's like, wait, I've never like really picked up a camera, but like, this is so creative. And it's like, oh my gosh. So now I'm getting to know who I truly am at a feeling and emotional level. And if I'm giving myself what I require, then of course I can bring whatever is needed into the circumstance, to give forgiveness to this person, to give, you know, unconditional love to the circumstance that I'm going through. And I do think that that really starts at the individual level, as you're saying, for that true divinity of unconditional love to be like birthed through us. There's just so much muck and the, you know, dirt and boulders of pain that get in the way. So I love that you know, show people like, yes, let's get in touch with the true essence of who you are.
Yeah, before we moved into like, you know, Western competitive society and we lived shamanistically or Neolithically, this was actually, you know, just part of the culture, like movement and emotional reverence and a huge reverence for grief, you know. And there was so much space, so much more space for emotional health and emotional intelligence, you know. And as things have become more competitive and, you know, productivity driven, we're almost sacrificing that part of ourselves. You know, this is all like everything that we're talking about right now is, you know, the gifts of the right hemisphere of the brain. And I was on a podcast recently where the person reflected back to me that the right hemisphere of the brain is in Western culture considered like for weekends and holidays. when it's actually the main meal, right? Like it's actually the main act. And it's the soul, right? And it's like, don't we all, well, it's the part of our brain that is connected to the soul. And I mean, if we, at the end of our lives, say we lived in alignment with our souls, that's a successful life. You know, you did it, right?
Absolutely. Yes, I couldn't agree more. So I have 2 questions. You kind of touched on it, but within this 3-week program that you're teaching people, what happens after 3 weeks? I mean, you mentioned for yourself, you are now like this forgiveness, like junkie, and you just have this formula and you use it. Is that what happens with your clients? Like you give them something
Are you creating forgiveness junkies?
I hope so. That is that is my greatest wish. My greatest goal in this world. So, it's actually a 6-week program where I teach
Oh,
the
okay.
3-week process. I teach a 3-week process within a 6-week program because even though I may one day write a book and, everyone tells me I need to write a book, there's part of me that's like, I don't want to add another word to the world of forgiveness because it's just so full of words, like mirrored by all these people who are not forgiving, right? Think of all the words out there about forgiveness and then think about all the people that are not forgiving. So I want to give people a lasting spiritual transformational experience. And that's why I do, 6 weeks. It's kind of like a boot camp where I want people to graduate and be like, oh, I got this. It's in my body. Like I will have this forever, that this is this tool that they can reach for no matter what is going on. And the world is getting more, tumultuous. So I think it's a very practical thing to know how to do because the world is incredibly emotionally provocative right now. And who needs more unprocessed emotions in the world, right? I mean, that's just going to add to the kind of mess that we're already in. So at the end of the 3 weeks, I'm shooting for inner peace at base level. That's like, and what I also hope people come away with, which I kind of think, and this is something I'm actually coming to in the last 6 months, that having a really rock solid relationship with the divine or with divine love, and again, it can be named and seen and understood in however a person wants to understand it. But that is actually an incredibly useful thing because I'll say it, I think it's the most important thing as we move into these times, is to have that rock solid relationship because it's supportive, it's restorative, it's regenerative, it really, and especially because isolation is such a big deal right now, when you have that relationship, you never feel alone. Like there's just so many benefits. So that's that's the kind of the second thing that's that I hope people get, even though in my mind, it's the most important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like you're giving them the opportunity to contemplate it in our existence here, we're all
to have a firsthand experience of it and they can decide for themselves. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, it is like our listeners will know, like Dan and I, like wholeheartedly, we all come from one source, whatever you'd like to call it, like God, the creator, the universe, life, like the great one, whatever. It's like we're all fragmented pieces of it here to experience life through our own unique soul's purpose. And it's that divine love that's working through us if we can achieve that.
All benevolent religions have, teachings of unconditional love at their core, so
yeah,
something that we all have in common.
Once you touch that and feel that, there's like no going back.
Right.
Yeah, and I think a big part of me, and I'm curious, like what your opinion would be for this. Like when I really grasped that, I was like, oh, okay, we're all one. We're all in this together. Like everything is being reflected back to me. Life is happening for me, not to me. And that, Dan is a part of me, like all my family, like friends, people that I don't know, they're just aspects of me reflecting back to me how I can learn and grow. It allowed me to have more compassion for someone and what they're going through. And then perhaps whatever they did to me in the circumstantial, discomfort that I may have experienced, it got me to a place of elevation. It helped me in one way or another. And it was like, oh shit, okay. Like, yeah, that really sucked. And I didn't like it. I hated that person for a really long time, but I get it now. I see it.
Right.
I almost can look back, bird's eye view. It was like, it happened this way. I can't change it. I can move forward. And it's like, beautifully lesson learned. And then I'm able to embody it at a deeper level.
Right. Yeah. Lovely. Amazing.
Okay.
Yeah. So the soul's curriculum. And when we dare to take ourselves out of the place of being done to, and into the place of okay, what's revealed to me? There is so much gold there.
Absolutely. It's so empowering.
And it's so empowering.
Mindset. And I do believe we came to learn through it. Like you said, it's to be human. It really is. But we all signed up for it. And I do believe the victim mentality is something to learn and grow through. Of course, we've all been there, and to not experience it, that we wouldn't be able to experience unconditional love and forgiveness and oneness. It's the polarity that's working. We've got to experience the hot to understand the cold.
Right. Well said.
I'm curious because you had mentioned this when you had put in your little like description to be on the show. Forgiveness anatomy.
Yeah, so that's the right hemisphere of the brain. So we're the Western Hemisphere is mainly developing the left hemisphere of the brain, which the way I like to understand it is the left hemisphere is the part of the brain that navigates the external world, and the right hemisphere is the part of the brain that navigates the internal world. So creativity, imagination, intuition, spirituality, emotional intelligence, these are all the qualities of the right hemisphere of the brain. And when we learn, that's what I teach people to do, is how to organize all those things that I just named into team forgiveness. Like once you bring them all together, then that part of the brain is it's the regenerative part of the brain. Like it's the brain part of the brain that restores us, and it has all the capacities that we need in order to do that. We're not here to get clobbered. Like that's like if you don't understand that part of the brain and what it can do and where it can take you and how it can restore you, then you kind of just think like I'm on this earth and I'm just getting pummeled. And that's not, like I say, I studied Buddhism for 6 years, and the main teaching of the Buddha is life is suffering. And when you first hear that teaching, when you're a sensitive person walking on this planet, you're like, oh my God, finally someone's saying it. Like, you just get so excited to hear that. But I've, thought about that teaching, since I've, now have become a forgiveness teacher. And I just think like, it's like, it's too much of a blanket statement. And if I could talk to him, I would say, hey, life is suffering, but it's also regenerative. And,
Wow.
you are going to have major disappointments and ruptures and betrayals. That is just part of the deal. That's just as relational humans. Like if you're a relational human that somehow went from birth to death without having some major heartache and I mean, I don't know, that's not possible. As I'm even saying it, it's just not possible. We're all going to be heartbroken at some point. So that's what I would say. Like life is heartbreaking and it's regenerative, and so learn how to use your regenerative skills because you were born with them.
Yes, absolutely. And I agree. And certainly when I first, we haven't studied Buddhism, sure, not to the extent, but we're very familiar with it. Listen to podcasts, read books, documentary series on it. So yes, life is suffering. I've ruminated and contemplated this a lot. And there's a teacher that I kind of fall back to. I really love his work. Do you know who Peter Crone is?
No.
They call him he calls himself the mind architect. He's all about like building and rebuilding like our subconscious limiting beliefs. And he said that like suffering truly comes from those subconscious patterns of the ego, from the stories that go on in our head. Like pain is inevitable. We're sentient beings. We're going to feel, hurt. If we're abandoned, we're going to hurt ourselves if we like hit our elbow or like have a headache. Those are pains. But the suffering comes when we attach the stories of whatever it is to those things. And that's what we get stuck in. And truly what he's saying is to alleviate that and break the limitations of that suffering is freedom. That's what we're here to hopefully like achieve in this earth realm reality that we're all living in. Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious as we're wrapping up here, because you certainly like you've turned these like very harsh like wounds into wisdom. Like, do you feel that what had transpired through your business, even though it was awful, like it led you to like this path as like the trueness and purpose of how you were destined to live and be here?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, it's definitely how my life is unfolding. Like, I feel a sense of right livelihood for sure, you know? So I would definitely like, as I said, the universe keeps me very humble. and keeps me walking my talk, you know, so that's how I see it. Like you know, like I work for the universe, and the universe is going to put things before me to like make sure that I stay humble and I stay in integrity with the teaching. When you're in the world of spirituality, like arrogance is one of the shadow sides of this world, you know, so, and I'm very aware of that. I see that potential in me also. And so I really like every day just kind of align with like, make me humble, make me a servant, you know, like before I get on a conversation, I'm like, please talk through me, take over, you know, take me over right now. So, and yes, I am constantly, constantly dazzled by the gems that I find when I go down the forgiveness path. Like, and it almost gets harder and harder for me. Like, as I move forward, like the hurdles get more challenging the more I do this practice. And again, like I every time I get to like, well, what am I supposed to do here? You know, and like, this one seems unresolvable or impossible. I always get the message like, hey, Dara, figure this out. You know, like, that's what we want you to do. Figure this out. And whenever I like accept the challenge and go for it, I'm always blown away by the gems. I'm like, oh my goodness, wow. Like, that was so worth it. And I'm so glad, like, for whatever the reason at this stage, I have been organized to not be able to reach for something, you know, the way I would have in my 20s, you know, that I really have to just like show up and be present for these incredibly strong energies and figure out that they're really gateways to my soul and gateways to my liberation. And in me kind of like going up against the scary, like figuring out how to help other people go up against it also in a way that is not as hard as what I have to do. And not as scary, and then, you know, like I have these experiences, and then I'm like, okay, how do I make this user friendly for everybody else?
Absolutely. Yeah. Life doesn't get easier. You just get stronger.
Yes. And, but going in is always worth it. Going in is always worth it. And uniting whatever is happening on this planet with unconditional love is, you know, always transformative. So, you know, I can say that for sure at this point in the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like that comes across very evident in the way that you speak and present yourself, especially when you're talking about this as something that you truly devote your life to and helping others and being in service, which is so fulfilling on so many levels. And it seems like you just beam when you're explaining, you know, this forgiveness path and redefining it, which I do believe is such a unique perspective that the world needs right now. We all kind of need better meaning for these words that are tainted at times and clouded with too much judgment. And I feel like you're giving a much newer perspective on that forgiveness way of being.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to make forgiveness practical, you know, because it's such a great idea in theory, right? We all can get behind the idea, the theoretical idea that we all have this power to transcend these, you know, difficult things. But it's like, okay, now, but how does that, what's the nitty gritty of actually doing that? And yeah, I hope that it is of benefit to many.
Yeah. Dara, this has just been such a pleasure. I feel like we resonate and are in alignment with so much of our views about life and everything. We covered so much, and I'm so glad that we had this discussion, but I also want to make sure that we touched upon everything that is on your heart and that you'd like to share with the audience. Did we miss anything?
Oh, I mean, if I could share anything, I just want to say you have this inside you. You were designed to heal, regenerate, and forgive. And yeah, I just want everybody to know that it really is anatomical.
Yes, that's such a beautiful, empowering message that we are able to do this. We're capable within ourselves, and you know, with the guides and help of people like you and others, it is magical to have that kind of sense of being in the world. So thank you. If people are interested in finding out more about you, connecting, looking into your 6-week program, how can they get in touch with you?
So my domain is howtoforgive.com, and how to forgive is what I typed in on that fateful night. And I offer the program once a season. And so yeah, so you can, the dates are on the course, and
You do it as like a group coaching?
yeah, so it's 12
Okay.
sessions, there's 12 sessions, and one session is content for the week, and then midweek there's an energy meditation, you know, again, to help people just learn about their energy body and to get things moving and flowing so that it creates space ultimately. And then we do that process as we go down the path over the 6-week period. And then at the end, you know, I imagine people are going to feel some sort of shift, you know, and what I hope it is they feel peaceful inside. And then they have this 3-week process to take forward with them, you know, into the world.
Oh, I love that. Thank you.
Sounds really
Yes,
powerful.
thank you so much for describing that. We will make sure to link that in the show notes.
Yeah.
Again, Dara, it's just been an absolute pleasure to share this space with you. Thank you for sharing all of it.
Thank you for creating this space, and, you know, both of you being so transparent and open. And yeah, this was an amazing conversation. And again, I'm so grateful that you had me on.
Thank you, Dara.